but he was right on. He had it, and this is in his footnotes. Here's an interesting thing. We call this soft archaeological evidence because we can't really tag it definitely. But this jug was found in the possession of, was found down along Cumberland River, but it's a three-headed jug vase, and it was in the possession in 1820 of a gentleman in Lexington, Kentucky. Nobody knew exactly what it was, but a neat kind of a thing, and certainly not American Indian. Up in Ohio, another three-headed stone was found. It has a head going this way, a head going this way, and a face of an animal going the other way. Three different heads. Some interesting looking things on the foreheads. And it translates out in the Coelbren alphabet. The Coelbren alphabet we'll be talking about a little later is, in fact, the alphabet that was used by the Welsh-speaking Indians. There's the translation. Back 200 and 300 BC, there were three faces all over Europe. It was a pagan tradition, they called it. It actually came out of the Babylonian area where Alan Wilson's going to tell you that these people came from. They were Chaldean. But there's the three-headed jug and there's the three-headed stone. In the church where Arthur's father is buried, King Myrig, we took this picture of them sharing the eyes of three heads. This was ordered, a decree from Rome to destroy all of these three heads all through Britain because they were thought to be pagan. And they slipped up and left this one there. Kind of neat. The important thing, however, is that one of those heads has, on the very top of it, if you look up high, it has a broad arrow or an Awen sign. It's the sign of God. E-A, Yah, becomes Jehovah. Anyway, unwritten, silent word for God. Definitely belonged to these people. In Britain, a couple blocks from Alan's house, on one of the bridges, we find this Awen sign. We find it in the churches. We find it on the prison jackets. We find it all over everything that is owned by the government, bayonets, you name it. And it's interesting because here it is on what the archaeologists in Kentucky call a chunky stone, a gaming stone. So I sent this over to Alan and his partner Brom, and I said, what do you make of this? And he sends me back 6 more just like it from Troy, where you're going to find these people came from. It isn't a chunky stone or a gaming stone. This is a whirl. They use these to manufacture cloth. Okay? It's like a flywheel, but you notice that it has the Awen signs all over it. Well, then as soon as I started looking at that, we started looking at Heinrich Schliemann's work, who dug up Troy, and the dates on these go back 500 BC. So here's one down at the bottom here that I've enlarged to show you that they made it with dots as well as with the firm arrow shape. So there's the chunky stone that we have in Kentucky. Rather hard evidence because isn't anybody on earth that could have faked this. I'm the first one that ever heard of it, and they found that in 1939. Archaeologists found it. Webb from the University of Kentucky. So, okay, that's how they used the stone you see here as a whirl to manufacture cloth. And of course, the mummies that they found all over Kentucky had a woven cloth that was manufactured somehow. Now we think possibly we know how. Here's a Frenchman that came down out of Manitoba, Canada, and he found the Mandan Indians because he'd heard there were Welsh-speaking Indians, and sure enough, they were Welsh-speaking Indians. But isn't it interesting? They wore a cross, and they spoke the name Jesus and Mary. A little strange for Indians, right? 1735. Now, I mentioned William Webb's name. He was a professor and head of the archaeology department at the University of Kentucky. He found these strange things up the river at near where Portsmouth is today. And it's called the Hardin Village site. It's on the Ohio River. This stone here is drawn out here. You see, we have a circle with a cross in it. We have a British-looking cross here, and we have the Awen sign in dots on the stone. Here's the actual piece, and you'll notice that the cross is entirely surrounded by the circle. And that's the way it was back in the 4th, 5th centuries. In fact, these are in the graveyards over there, and you'll see how the cross got away and came out beyond about 700s. There's a 4th, 5th, and 700 cross. So we kind of got a peg on when these people came. Here it is in a mound down in Georgia, in a hand, which is also a symbol we don't have time to go into. This is a beautiful thing that was found also by Webb in 1939 at the Hardin Village site. Again, a Celtic cross, if you will. And if you look closely, there is a second ring here that goes all the way around. It's been chipped off. There's also 3 chevrons on all of these, chevrons here, and there's an alphabet up here. A little strange for Indians to independently invent something like this on this continent. But when we looked at the at the family crests of all of the kings of Britain, here are all of the 12 tribes. Amazing how this got into the culture of the British people. But you also see that the kings of Glamorgan were in fact chevrons. Neat. Then we find up the river some banner stones, some kind of something. We don't know exactly what they are, but here you've got the 3 chevrons again, some going up, some going down. Here's another piece in the home of the sheriff, chief of police up there, and amazing. But there's an EA, and I told you before, that's their god. It's Ea, came to earth in an egg, half fish, half man. That's what was on. They found armor plating at the falls of the Ohio. They said there was a harp and a mermaid. It wasn't a mermaid, it was a fish god. And it was the Chaldean god that came out, got into some of the Hebrew stuff. This is also in his collection. That is an A and that is an E. There's other letters on it. We didn't even see it till we photographed it and blew it up. It's in his home up there. Absolutely authentic, because I'm the first one that knew about this alphabet. This is also in the chief's collection. I plopped this on the table at the British Museum and asked the archaeologist, Dr. Youngs, I said, what does that look like to you? We're finding things like this over in Kentucky. And she looked at that and she says, yeah, I think that's a distributor. So anyway, here's what we find. This is eastern Kentucky, and if you go up the Ohio River, you'll see up here there was writing up here. You saw the crosses and the letters we found here. At Charleston, writing at Brandenburg, then mummies found, and in these 3 locations, those mummies had cloth and deerskin wrappers. Writing found here, and there's other writing all around this area. In Sneedville, there were Melungeons, okay? Sneedville and this whole valley area. And then 26 miles away at Bat Creek, there was some writing, which you'll see in a little bit. This is what a Melungeon looked like in 1820. They were white. They tried to keep them from voting by telling them that they were Indian or that they were black. Couldn't do it. But they did say that they were Christians. Okay, this is a 5-factor blood study done by Tennessee anthropologists in spring of 1990. And you'll notice that the correlation in the blood factors with the Melungeons is Libya, Canary Islands, Portugal, that's the Iberian Peninsula, Italy, Cyprus, Spain. Wales is a close hit, but the American Indians appear to be the complete opposite blood factors. The Melungeons do not appear to be American Indians. Now, Prehistoric Men of Kentucky, written by Colonel Bennett Young, Wilson Club, 1910, he talks about finding in 1776, now that's 3 years before the first log cabin was built in Lexington, finding some mummies in a cave, and they were processed by some count. This was not reported by Raffines, but Raffines, our first professor of history at Transylvania College, reported all the other mummies. And in Scotland, in the archives of Scotland, is this letter. It goes back to 1815 by a Dr. Mitchell, written to the Earl of Buchan. And he talks about these mummies found at 2 different locations and Sure enough, when we went back, we compared this letter to the actual newspaper articles, and they were absolutely correct all the way. They did have deerskins wrapped around them. They did have a cloth. The skin looked like dried bacon. Up here, one of them had a fine linen shirt on. Amazing. Indians in fine linen shirts. Should have been a dead giveaway. Wasn't. Okay, these are the mummies then that came out of Kentucky. The first short cave, it's about 8 miles out of Mammoth Cave. All those mummies are gone except for Fawn Hoof. Fawn Hoof is in the Smithsonian Institute. We have a request working for a year now for DNA and for carbon dating on her. Scudder's mummy. Oh, here's a dead giveaway. One of the mummies that showed up in the literature, 1835. This was written by Josiah Priest, and it says that the mummy down in Florida had an alphabet on it that looked exactly like the letters that they had seen in the British Isles on metal. If they had followed this clue up, it would have made all of our research redundant, because here's the clue that would have given it all away. And again, cloth manufactured from the bark of trees. This is Scudder's mummy. Went to Scudder's Museum and was burned up in P.T. Barnum's circus about 20 years later. It's gone, but raffinists do this, and it would make a good book cover. This is Fawn Hoof's skull. It's in the Smithsonian Institute. We did a craniometric examination because American Indians have 3 plates, 3 sutures, and 3 Inca bones, they call them. And those Inca bones differentiate all those people that came across the Bering Strait, Mongolian bloodline, with the Caucasians. Well, she didn't have those bones, but they said, oh, well, we found a lot of these too, so that doesn't mean anything. We were looking particularly at the teeth, because the teeth would have large pulp chambers. All the Asian people have large pulp chambers. But unfortunately, the front teeth, which would have been shoveled if they had been American Indian, scooped out, if you feel back in there, they were missing. They were on this mummy when she went up there, because we've got the writing. They were intact and in good shape, but those are the first teeth that go that only have one root. Anyway, there she is, and we hope to get a carbon dating on her. There's enough tissue. This is the turn of the century, a photograph of her, named Fawn Hoof because of the little hooves that she had around her neck. Then we sent some of the messages over to Wales, and in hoping that if the Welsh-speaking Indians had an alphabet, that we could identify some of the things that we'd found in Kentucky that had writing on them. And Alan Wilson did that, and Alan Wilson will now come up and tell us. Oh, there's his book, incidentally. We've got 5 or 6 copies if somebody is interested. Thank you.
Thoroughly mechanized, am I? What do I do with this? Is that backwards? That's it. Got right.
You give me a point?
I don't know. I've got 2 hands. I'm going to start off by going in the wrong direction, but bear with me because it may pay off. I started looking at the history of Southeast Wales about 35 years ago as a hobby, and my reason for starting to look at it was that I didn't believe a damn thing I was told in school.